What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Tool Time. In this video we'll be looking at the Scallop, Crystallize and Wrinkle tools in Adobe Illustrator. And if you want to follow along, then you can download a free template file for this lesson from the description below. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to our lead designer Rory, who will show you how it works.
Thanks Ross. So jumping straight into our template file, we have some objects already set up that we're going to use these tools on. We are going to start with the Scallop tool, and this can be found over on the left hand toolbar, and it sits underneath the Width tool. So if I click and hold on the Width tool, all three of the tools we're going to be looking at sit at the bottom of this submenu. So starting with the Scallop tool, we can simply use this by clicking and dragging over any paths within our document. So we don't actually have to select anything first. However, that being said, if I actually select an object first and then select my tool, and this applies to all of these tools, we're only going to affect our selected object. So to use the Scallop tool, I can simply click and hold on this object, and you can see it's starting to warp the path here. If I let go, we're going to get a quite interesting looking effect. Now what I can also do is double click on the tool itself, and we can do this again with all three of these tools, where we get some more options. So I can set things like the brush dimensions, the angle at which the effect is going to be applied, the intensity, as well as things like detail as well down here. If I up the intensity, it's obviously going to create a more dramatic looking effect. But in this case, I'm just going to leave these settings as they are and click OK. I can also adjust my brush size on the fly by holding Option or Alt on a PC, and if I click left or right, that's going to adjust the width, and up and down is going to adjust the height. If I hold Shift at the same time, it's going to lock this, and I can scale this as a perfect circle, which I'm going to do in this case. So one thing with all these tools is that we actually have to overlap the brush with a path itself. If this is too small, for example, and I start clicking, nothing is actually going to happen. So I need to make sure that I am overlapping the path in some way. What I'm going to do here though is make my brush slightly larger than this circle, and I'm going to snap to the center point, and this will give you a clearer idea of what the Scallop tool does. So if I simply click and hold now, and I'll do this a few more times, you can see this is essentially warping this object and pulling sections of the path in towards the center point of the brush. So we can create some quite interesting looking objects with this tool. Moving on to the Crystallize tool, this essentially does the opposite. So I'm not going to adjust any settings or the brush size. I'm just going to snap to the center of this second circle here and click and hold. Now we're not going to see as extreme an effect because our brush size is limiting how much this is going to affect this object. So again, holding Shift and Option and clicking and dragging, I'm just going to make my brush slightly larger, and if I click again, you can see what is happening. So this is essentially doing the opposite. It's pushing the path out the way and creating this spiky looking edge to it as well. Moving on to our last tool, we have the Wrinkle tool. So again, before I start using this, I'm going to double click on the tool, and we have the same settings in terms of the brush size, the angle, the intensity, but we also have horizontal and vertical values, and these basically determine how much the effect is going to be applied depending on the angle of the path we are dealing with. So for example, I'm going to take our vertical value down to 0, I'll click OK, and I'm going to leave my brush size quite large for this, and if I simply just click and hold on this and let go, what it's doing is applying this effect, and it's essentially roughening the edge of this path. However, it's not really affecting the top and bottom of this circle because they are the more vertical areas. So I'm just going to press Command Z, go back into our Wrinkle tool options, and I'll put this back up to 100%, click OK, and I'll just do the exact same thing. Now we're getting more of an effect the whole way around the circle. So just quickly going back through all of these tools, we can also use them by, instead of clicking within a shape, we can click outside of a shape to get a slightly different look. So for example, I'm just going to make this brush slightly smaller here with the Scallop tool, and if I click on the outside of this circle and just follow around, you can see again the path is trying to pull in towards the center of this brush, and we can create something slightly different. Conversely, with the Crystallize tool, this is going to do the opposite, so you won't be able to see it that well against the orange of this circle, but this path will be pushing away from the center of our brush. Last but not least, where the Wrinkle tool can be very useful is to give a straight edged object a kind of rough look. So I'm just going to select the Wrinkle tool here, going to make the brush size slightly smaller, and I'm just going to lightly click and drag over all of the paths of this outlined letter A. If I go back over it, it should apply a greater effect to this, and I'll do the inside of the letter A as well. And as you can see, this is just creating a subtle rough edge to this letter, so this can be very useful if you want to just roughen up the look of an object. But that's really it for an overview of the Scallop, Crystallize and Wrinkle tools in Adobe Illustrator.